What stops most businesses from growing isn't the market, the competition, or even capital. It's the founder's inability to break through their own growth barriers. Today's guest has spent more than 3 decades helping entrepreneurs make what he calls the 10x leap, the shift from operator to owner, from plateau to scalable growth. If you've ever wondered what truly makes a company investable or why some businesses stall while others break through, you'll hear about it from someone who's been on both sides of the table. Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to the Reluctant Entrepreneur Podcast. This is the show where we explore the real stories behind the entrepreneurial journey, how businesses are built, how leaders evolve, and what it truly takes to create something that lasts. No hype, no cliches, just honest conversations with people who've lived it. Today, I'm joined by Steve Walsh, founder and CEO of Bison Equity Group. Steve brings more than 30 years of financial investment and business strategy experience, and he's built a firm focused on helping entrepreneurs scale, overcome growth barriers, and become more investable. He's also the author of Make the 10x Leap, a book that lays out a framework for achieving significant, sustainable growth by improving what he calls an organization's scalability factor. In this episode, we'll talk about Steve's own entrepreneurial path, the lessons he's learned after years in corporate leadership, and the moment he decided to build something on his own. Then we'll dive into his expertise, what causes companies to stall, what separates an operator from an owner, and what founders can do to prepare themselves and their businesses to make a true 10x leap. My conversation with Steve Walsh begins right now. Stick around. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Mike.
Well, we crashed into each other there. How are you?
Great. How you doing?
Good. Well, I'm glad you're on my show today. Thanks for being my guest. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, I am too. We had this little conversation beforehand, so it looks like, we have a lot of things in common. So
Yeah. So, Steve, what inspired you to leave the perceived security of a 9-to-5 job and start signing the front of the checks versus the back of the checks? So what inspired you to start Bison Equity Group, and what problem, if any, did you see in the market that you wanted to solve?
So, I've really always signed my own check for the last 30 some years. And this was just an opportunity. I had got into a lot of angel investing. That was kind of I've done that for 30 years or so of investing in real estate, angel investing. And I got into seeing the same things happening over and over again with entrepreneurs. And the one thing I would say is they can't get out of their own way a lot of times.
Yeah.
And that's really where I came in, decided that, hey, I'm going to start this company and really work with entrepreneurs, bringing in investors if need be, and then working with the entrepreneurs to grow their business. Because I feel that the one thing they kind of miss a lot of times is somebody that actually helped them, from the outside. If I get in the weeds a lot of times with the company, I really don't see what's actually going on the outside. And that's what a lot of times with businesses have when they're so into it all the time. They just don't see what they have potential in doing. That's the one thing about scaling is if you get out of your own way sometimes and replace yourself. It comes down to the one thing is entrepreneurs always say that I can't find somebody to do what I can do, and that's not true. It's
definitely
never
not true. Yes. Yeah. I think, well, a couple of points there. Reactive points. It's been said by many, and it's almost to the point of cliche, but it actually is meaningful, that we need to work on our business, not in our business. And to your point, when we're in our business, which I was for many years when I started mine, I bootstrapped, my company. I started in a garage 33 years ago, and I was so deep into the weeds. We talk about forests and trees. I don't even think I saw the trees. I was like way down in the root level in the dirt, and it's really easy to, kind of get, myopathy, and not being able to see anything in the peripheral at all, and that's a problem. The other problem I had was I didn't really, because I was bootstrapping my company. I had almost no money. I couldn't afford to get anyone to do something. So my strategy back in the day was, if I can do it, I'm going to do it. Even if I can't do it that well, it's still a better alternative than taking very precious financial resources and hiring someone to do something that I can hack it out, right? And then you realize that you're like a restaurant owner with 4 tables. The tables are all full. You can never grow. You can never scale because that's it. So I think that's something pretty much every business founder goes through in one way or another. Is that your experience?
Yeah, I think a lot of times what you said earlier about paying, finding somebody that a lot of times they tell themselves, we can't afford it. The thing is, what it comes down to, you can't not afford it.
Right.
I look at it as, once you bring that one person in, it's amazing what it frees up. An amount of income that you actually start bringing in because of it frees you up for some other things that you're probably missing out on. And that's one thing I always tell, it's that one person that you need to get, a lot of times the founders, the visionary, they see this big picture. It may not see a big picture, but then they also need somebody to come in and do some of the stuff in the weeds. And that's the person that a lot of times they don't have, and that it's a lot of times they do themselves. So if you get the mindset of like, we're going to find the money, it's just a matter of, it's not going to be that, the problem is, it's never the capital. It never comes down to, when you look at it, that is the last thing. It's amount of mindset that person can say, okay, we want to get from A to B. And that, let's say that A is, I always tell them, if you want to get to 10 million, make it 50, because 10 million is something that you can achieve. Maybe 50 is something that you're really not even thinking it's possible. And then work backwards from that. Work backwards and say, what are the things I need? Systems, people, capital. And then from there, it's a matter of like, okay, let's get this scaled. I had a talk with a entrepreneur yesterday, and he was like, I just want to raise 1.2 million. I'm like, that doesn't seem like a lot of money. And he wants,
it's a very specific amount too. I mean, it's wonder
right,
where that came
exactly.
from, right?
And he wants to get to 100 million. And I'm thinking, I said, you're so far below what you should be raising. But his mindset was that, hey, this is all I need right now. And the mindset should be is, okay, let's do at least double that, double 2.4. That's better runway, faster to move. We could hire some of the people we need, things like that. And then his valuation was off. It was a little low. We bumped it up just because we were going to be raising more money. And so that was the one thing I'd say is, a lot of times entrepreneurs think smaller, and they have to think, bring them out and think a lot bigger than they have been in the past.
Yeah. One of the things, and I've talked about this many times on the show, so my regular audience is going to go, he's talking about it again, is, when you come to make a decision, and the analogy I always give is, let's just say you're at the end of a road and your company either needs to go left or right? You're at an intersection. That's the decision. And, you go, well, I really want to go left, but it's too expensive. I don't have the capital and I don't have the time. So we're going to go right. Okay, well, hold on. What's the right decision? Well, the right decision, if you factor, money and time, is to go right. It's easier. Okay, but take time and money off the table. You have all the time in the world, all the money in the world. Which direction would you go? Well, I'd go left. That's the right decision. Okay, now we get to the point where you've made the decision, the company needs to go left. And now work on the time and the money. But the time and the money never come until we decide as the owner of the business that we are going to go left, because our mindset is just not queued up to solve that problem. We are just deer in the headlights, paused, and we do nothing because we can't make a decision. And I think a lot of business owners are just overwhelmed by, I don't have enough people, so I can't do this. Or, maybe they have an opportunity to acquire a competitor or something, but I don't have enough money to do that. Get yourself first, baby steps. First step, decide what you're going to do, right? And then figure out the problem. And I think entrepreneurs are very good at problem solving, one problem at a time. We're very good at that. But we don't even start to solve the problem because we don't commit to anything, because we're in this state of flux. Do you see is that just me, or do you see other people doing that as well?
I see it all the time. I mean, I think that's one thing, we invested in this software company, and one of the things, they had an opportunity to hire this sales guy that ate and drank their products. He was in the enterprise space. He was really good, but they, like you said, settled for third place, the third place pick. And so instead of the top one, and one of the things they had said is, we can't afford it. And I said, you cannot afford it. And so getting to think about that is that is the first thing you need to do, is really get them to think differently. And I would say that is always the thing that they are struggling with. And I see it all the time. But you have to, it's, that's one of the things, what I always say about coaches and mentors are really good for, if an entrepreneur is willing and open to bring in a coach or a mentor to really help them think differently. And
Yeah.
I think he probably have that all the time, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I brought on a coach / mentor, probably a little bit more mentor, and she was nuts. And I say that in the moment. I'm just like, are you kidding me? I'm paying you for this advice? This is crazy. It's so counterintuitive. It's nuts. It turned out to be the best advice I ever got, and I had to reprogram myself to consider the possibilities and not just reject it, and every idea that she brought up was so radical from my perspective. Now it's not. Now it seems very mainstream, but from my perspective, it was very radical, and it took a big leap of faith to even give it a shot. But it's, we come, when we start a business, when we live our life, even, we look through life and business through a very specific lens based on preconceived notions and former experiences and fear and all of that. So it takes a long time to deprogram all that stuff. And I think, as you said earlier, get out of your own way and all that. You've spoken about burnout being part of your story. How did that experience influence your perspective as both a founder and an investor?
One of the things, when you're in it so long and you've been doing the same thing, and you want to get to the next level, but it's a matter of okay, what is it I need to do? So you're going to work harder. That's going to be the thing. The next thing is, let's just work harder, more hours, more time, doing things like that. That's not the way to go. And what it came down to is, how do I make myself think smarter, think sharper, think about things a little bit differently to get myself out of that. And that's really where I got past that burnout, because the burnout was, that was the one thing I would say is to get myself over to the next level. That would be, the one thing is do things that you normally wouldn't do. And that's what I look at is my journey was, I started doing things that were really out of my norm. And, I'm a big believer in meditation. I'm a big believer on uh, working out, things like that kind of get your mind thinking differently. Um, Being in nature, I'm a big believer on doing some of that stuff, and that helps me. But it's all about going back to the me hiring a coach made a big difference. Me finding mentors made a huge difference just to get past that burnout
Yeah.
and be real.
Yeah, my team used to get frustrated whenever I would go on a vacation, and my family and friends all we go to Mexico every year, for a full week, and it's just check out, float in a pool, just commiserate with all our friends and celebrate life, and all this. And when I'm there, after a couple days, once I'm completely unplugged, creative ideas just start flowing through my head. Now, I don't know how much of that is influenced by tequila or, whatever, but when I come back, I am rested and relaxed, obviously, but I'm energized. And I come back and I meet with my team, or back in the day anyway, I did that. And I'd have all these ideas, and they're like, "Oh, Mike's been on vacation again. Okay, here come all the crazy ideas." But I think sometimes, we talked about being so deep you can't see the forest from the trees. I think sometimes just getting helicoptered out, even for a day, or a few days, lets you see a little bit over the horizon. You're not caught up in the minutia, the minute by minute, firefighting duty that one does in the early stages of a business, and you can see with a little bit more perspective. I think it's really important to step away for a little bit, not abandon it, obviously, but just get a fresh perspective, and it comes quickly. It doesn't take long once you bring your head up from your desk and start looking up rather than down. It's amazing what comes to you, because all the experiences are there. Your brain just starts processing it differently, right? It's not under the same amount of stress. That's what I do whenever I'm starting to get burned out. I'm like, let's go to Mexico. I don't know if that's good for my liver, but it's definitely good for my psyche. Was there a specific moment when you realized that in building Bison Equity Group that you'd shifted from being an operator to an owner yourself, or did you already learn that lesson earlier in your career?
I think I learned it when we were working with a pet supplement company, and I was pretty into it. And the owner, the operator, the visionary of the company, he was he needed certain things, and one of the things, he was not willing to give up a lot of control, but he knew he needed to give up control, and so I made it to go out and find people to replace certain things. Well, marketing was one of probably the most important thing. I think that I didn't know at the time, but I saw that marketing is so important when it comes to a company. And one of the things I worked on a lot is that when we were looking at that pet supplement company, and I felt that we weren't getting traction. A lot of it was because of that, but a lot of it was to do with the control thing, giving up control, and I think that's really when I really started learning a lot about stepping out, really looking at, okay, what is going to be what they need, and I could see into the company versus being in the company.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think probably earlier in my career, I didn't see it as much as I probably saw it now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think the big reason is working with other entrepreneurs is really what is really helped, is because I do see the same things go through. It's funny that everybody says, "Oh, my problem's different." It's not. I mean, there's probably two handfuls, I could probably say, you run across the same thing, and entrepreneurs do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Their company's different. They can't do it. They say all the things that they say to themselves. And every entrepreneur does that. He tells himself that. And they still do. The one thing is, I learned that's where the burnout, when I started deciding that I want to work smarter instead of harder.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one thing I think, really trying to work with entrepreneurs on saying, okay, you don't need to do that 80 hours a week. And in fact, it's probably the worst thing you could be doing is 80 hours a week. Instead, let's see what we can do to replace that and do some of the things that you enjoy doing instead of always being in it. And like you said, taking that trip to Mexico so that you can get some more creative ideas, things like that, that you could bring back to your employees. And your employees, quite frankly, probably a lot of times enjoy that you're gone. That's
I can guarantee that. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. They don't like it when I come back. That's the only thing, right?
Hey, I mean, they can get things done and sometimes a lot quicker if you're just out of the picture. But that's the one thing I would say is that it really resonated probably, I would say 10 years ago, it really hit. And then from there, it's just been all the time. That's what I see. That's why I started Bison Equity Group. It's just because I was seeing the same stuff. And I wanted more control myself on what companies to invest in, who I want to invest in, what type of companies I want to invest in, and really how I can bring value to the entrepreneur. And that's the one thing I'd say is, as an investor, a lot of times entrepreneurs are looking at investors just a problem. They're going to take up my time, whatever. I look at it as a partnership. You bring in value to your entrepreneur, you can bring value to them. And the more value you can bring, if I can bring in people, systems, capital, and then just ideas, and to get to them to the next level, things that they probably would never think about. The one thing I would say is, I am a big I love to learn different things, learning mindset. And I would say the more you can work with entrepreneurs, do as much studying, reading, a lot of those types of things, you can really give them ideas that probably they won't think about.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. A fresh perspective.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your book, Make the 10X Leap. Focuses on helping entrepreneurs overcome growth barriers. What are the most common barriers you see that prevent companies from scaling?
I think a lot of times it's just thinking they can do it. That's really what it starts. It starts with, the idea is that they say, maybe they have a competitor they're at 10 times where they're at. And they for some reason decide that they can't do that. And I say that, why can't you do that? The thing is, well, we don't have either the people, all the stuff they tell themselves. But the idea is that you got to think about starting, about where you want to be. Do you want to be at that 100 million mark? Is that where your mark is? And then I'd say is really think about, is it possible? Meaning that they have to actually think that it is possible, because a lot of times they get to the point where, we can't do that. And so work backwards from that number. And then from there, it's a matter of like, okay, what do we need to do? It's an A to B exercise, really. And that is one thing I would say is that entrepreneurs, and that's where the book comes into play. It starts with that mindset. It is, you're working 80 hours a week. You got to replace yourself with somebody else to get you out of that seat. There's a story in the book, and it's a good friend of mine. He was a sushi chef, and he had a one shop. He was working 80 hours a week. He was doing pretty much everything. He was doing the chef. He was doing all of it. And he found a entrepreneur. He had a mentor as an entrepreneur. He said, "So what do you want to be? You want a business owner? Or do you want to be a sushi chef?" Obviously, want to be a business owner. And so once he had that mindset, he changed once his mindset changed, he went from 1 to 8 within 12 months.
Wow.
And that really what changed it. It was the mindset of that he was going to become a business owner. And that really happens a lot of times with entrepreneurs is they get into it. They're doing the one thing that they're really good at. They made the widget, whatever they're doing, the service, whatever they're doing, and they're good at it. And then they decide that, that they're working long hours, and they all of a sudden now they're doing that 8 hours a week. And then I'm like, but they can't seem to figure out, we need to replace me and get me out of there. And then, so I can become the business owner. So I can do that I have done in the past.
Work on, not in the business. Yeah.
Yep.
You often use the term scalability factor. A, what does that mean? And B, how can founders identify and improve theirs?
So, a lot of times what it goes back to every company is scalable. I don't care what it is. It may not look like it is your now. Whatever your company is now may not look that way, but it is scalable. So the scalability factor is, what do you have in place right now that can get you the next level? What is that? And that's where that scalability factor comes into play. Do you have the systems? Do you have the people? Do you have the right people? That a lot of times happens is, do you have the right people on point to get them to the next level? Because a lot of times those people in the beginning are not going to be the people that you're going to have down the road.
Right.
A lot of times it's just not, they don't have the expertise that you need, things like that. And so it's the scalability factor is, do you have the pieces in place that one more widget, what do you have to do? Do you have to add more people because of that? Or can you build one more widget and you don't have to add more people. You don't have to do another system. You don't have to more capital. Those are the things I think you look at.
Interesting.
And yeah, so and I like manufacturing, I like software. Those are the two areas that I really like working in, because software's a lot easier to scale. And manufacturing, I like manufacturing just because I've always been fascinated with building something.
Yeah. Yeah. That's my business. We're an equipment manufacturer, and I love it. I love the engineering side of it, the creative side of it, and the fact that, we ship a box. And no disrespect to service industries. Right. I mean, obviously we use service industries in building our boxes, that we send out, but I do find that fascinating. What are the biggest differences between an operator and an owner? You talked about the sushi chef. As a chef, definitely operator. As a higher up, it would be a business owner. And why is that transition so critical in scaling a business? You did give some examples about the sushi chef, but in general, whether it's manufacturing or service or software or whatever, why is that so critical?
Oh, it's critical in the sense that if you're in the business all the time, you can't think about some of the things that as an owner you really need to do. It's interesting. I always like to see founders have an operator. It's always or two founders. It's great to see two founders that have different skill sets. And I've run across really good founders that had an operator also. And it's funny, the stories you talk to them about. The one thing that a lot of times is the owner will be like, "Man, this was fun. I had a great time. I want to do this again," because they'd sold out. The operator was like, "I just need to take some time off."
They're done. Yeah, they're tired.
So they've been in the business for, they've been doing a lot of the work, but I would say the owner is the visionary. He sees a bigger picture. He sees things that you typically would not probably see if you're always in the business. Look farther, opportunities, doing acquisitions, things like the higher level things that they need to work on. And if you're always in the business, it's really hard to do that too. Wear both hats basically. And
Yeah.
so that's where in play is find that operator that can run the bids, run some of the things that you need to have run, but also so that way you're getting out and doing things that you want to do to expand your business. That's one of the goals, is that you want to expand it to a level that you think is saleable.
For companies seeking investment, what do you look for when determining if a business is even ready for capital?
I think a lot of times it is that, seeing what they have in place. Do they have the systems in place? Do they have people? Maybe they don't have people on the payroll right now, but do they have ideas of who they need to get in place in their business? And then from there, it's a matter of like, what kind of capital do they want? They want do they want somebody to come in as somebody like me and I'll take an equity piece? Do they want debt? What are the types of capital they want? But the biggest thing I would say is to be ready is one of the things is getting the pieces in place before. If I come in, I want to make sure you have a plan. The plan is, what are you going to do with this capital? Because a lot of times what happens is you start throwing capital to somebody, they're going to start spending on things that they probably you shouldn't have,
Right.
Shouldn't do.
Right.
And that's one of the things I would look at. When I was in college, I remember there was a guy that I worked at a greenhouse, and I still remember this because I remember he had brought investors in and he started spending money on things that made no sense for the business. It made no sense. And I was in college at the time, and I was like, he was buying things that he probably never would have bought anyway. So
like the money was burning a hole in his pocket, right?
Right, exactly. So that was the thing. The business plan, you need to have some sort of business plan in place. And I say an investment plan, a plan to say, okay, we are going to put money into these areas so that we can do the right things, the things that need to be expanded. And I would say the more things like that you're prepared, it's so much easier when you get ready to scale. And it's like, basically flipping a switch. That's kind of what I look at it as.
Yeah.
And so but I look at, when I come in, I look at the books, obviously. When I look at a company, I look at what they're doing, seeing where they're weak in certain areas. But I tell you what, the first thing I really look at is the founder. I look at the founder first than anything else. And it's a matter of, is the founder ready? Is the founder have a growth mindset? Do they a learning mindset? Do they have the things that are they open to ideas?
Right.
Things that can get them the next level.
How can entrepreneurs prepare themselves, not just their financials, to attract investors successfully? How do they get your attention?
My attention, I think it's a matter of one, reach out to me first, obviously, but also the idea is that they feel ready, that they know they know there's an opportunity there. They know they can do that. They have the ability to do that. They just don't have some of the things that they need up front. And they have the idea is that, hey, I understand I don't know everything. And that, I can come in and I'll bring a team in and work with them on, let's say, well, what do we need? Let's see your books. Look at your books. What's your inventory levels like? What are the things, what's your, receivables like? Things like that. And then look at what their employees are like. I think, I get so much information from just interviewing an employee. I get, when the CEO is not there or the founder's not there and I'm talking to employees, I get a lot of information and I learn a lot about the company itself, how the employees look at the founder, and that tells me a lot of times that they're prepared, that they understand that the the employees are just as excited as the founder is, and I think I get more information just by talking to the employees.
You know, someone told me a long time ago about this practice. They called it MBWA, and it's management by walking around. And I'm like, well, I can walk around. Yeah, I'm capable of that. But for years, every morning, I'd get into the factory and I would just walk around and just shoot the breeze. I couldn't hide the fact that I'm the business owner. I'm the CEO. So that aura, was kind of there. But I didn't do it in that capacity officially. It was just more, hey, Bob, how was your weekend? Did your dog have the puppies? Whatever. And just keep it casual and not like a strategic planning meeting. And it was absolutely amazing. I was amazed at how much information I got that was helpful. And, particularly, Bob would go, hey, I have an idea. I think shipping could, Bob's over here and shipping's over there. Everyone has an idea for another department, which is actually a pretty good idea, and how it, lands on them. And it just became a routine. And at first, when I started it, everyone was guarded. What does Mike want to hear? And then it eventually, it got pretty authentic, and I just learned so much. Compare that to a staff meeting. If I had an all hands meeting, it would be very formal. It would be very, what does he want to hear? Ask him to jump how high. It would be like, I don't want that. I want that true, authentic, conversational, person to person, not necessarily, management to staff. It definitely works, and I think in your world especially,
Yeah.
you're going to really get the inside track by when the owner's not there, for sure.
I've learned a lot from that. There was a story. I have a story. I was interviewing this company and looking at this company invest in, and I always look at the competitor, talk to the competitor first, and then look at their company. And then I started talking to the employees. And one of the things that they found out that we were going to bring in capital for the company. And one of the employees said, he, for some reason, knew he was upper management, knew what they wanted for raise for capital. And he said, it's not enough. And that's so it was a really good telltale about even what the employees would say, besides the upper management. So,
in your experience, what separates businesses that plateau versus those that truly can make the 10x leap?
What it comes down to, I go back to the same thing. It's the founder. The founder the founder's plateaued.
You're putting a lot of pressure on me, Steve. You're putting an awful lot of pressure on me. But you're right. I agree with that. Yeah.
It's because a lot of times, right now we have a big 58 to 75-year-old. There's going to be a big fluctuation of companies being sold. And a lot of these companies have not done a lot of the things that they need to do to scale or sell. And there's going to be a big push now to get these companies out the door, that's sold either, and they're not going to sell. And a lot of it's to do with the owner's already plateaued. The owner's already been pretty much out.
Yeah.
They've been doing the same thing for the last 30 years, and now it's a matter of, okay,
yeah,
we're done. And so that's what it comes down to. It's that. And so that shift, I always say, bring in some new blood. Bring in some new blood. And that's, get some different perspective. And it's amazing what you can do, but also allow that new blood to actually do some of the things that need to be done. A lot of times business owners are notorious for not wanting to bring on debt. They're worried that if they bring on debt, it's going to they're just not used to that. And so they want to be debt free. And a lot of times it's, if you can bring in smart debt or bring in capital, one of the two, it's probably the best thing if you want to grow. If you don't want to grow, then it's going to be what it is. It's where you're at. And then it's a matter, if that's the case, then I think it's probably you're probably ready to sell.
Yeah.
If you're not really grow, that's probably the time.
From what I understand, Bison Equity Group partners with both founders and investors. Is that accurate? What makes that dual perspective valuable in guiding growth? Being on both sides of the fence.
I'll bring in investors. We'll invest as a group. What I do like to do is I would like to bring in smart investors that maybe, let's say it's a manufacturing company. If I can bring in investors that maybe have done that in the past, maybe they'd had a manufacturing company or things like that. Maybe I can we'll bring some expertise in. So it's a matter and that's the one thing I would say is a lot of times with an entrepreneur, they look at capital and they don't look at the same. They look at all the same. They don't see the difference between, capital that they just want income, capital wants growth. They don't see the difference. And then they don't see the problems you run into a lot of times when you have a investor that they don't see, they don't like what's going on. And so that's where I come into play. I'm the go-between. I'm the guy that I go back to the investor and say, this is where we're at. This is what's happening. The good and bad. And then it's a partnership with the entrepreneur. And it's a matter of what can we do to get you to the next level. And it's never going to be it's never going to look the way we think it's going to look. It never is. But the thing is, investors want you to tell them the truth. And if it's a matter of hey, this is something that, what's happening with this company, but this is how we're going to fix it. And it's a matter of being authentic. And that's where I come into play, is that go between the two. And then like I said, I like to bring in investors that have been entrepreneurs, because it's really that way they kind of know, hey, it's never going to be perfect. And but the other thing is too, some investors just like income, but then there's some that they like to see the growth and they don't care about the income. And so that's a matter of as an entrepreneur, you got to really make sure when you're bringing in capital, what you're going to do. What kind of capital do you want to bring in?
Yeah. We talked about how you pick companies to invest in. How should a company go about choosing the right type of investor?
It is a matter of what they're looking for as an investor. What am I looking for? What type of information are they going to provide me? And it's a matter of how hands-on. How hands-on do you want the investor? Do you want the investor to help you grow the business, or do you just want the capital? If you want just the capital, I'm probably not going to be the person for that.
Right.
But if you want, a lot of entrepreneurs, that's the only thing they're looking for. But if you want more than just that, if you want other things besides just capital, I'm going to be the guy for you. And it's a matter of and that's that partnership. It is a true partnership. Instead of being, that fence between the investors and the entrepreneur, it is going to be a true partnership. And that's the way it has to look. And so when we look at it, I look at entrepreneurs and they say, hey, we just want to get 10. And I said, well, let's get to 50 then. Let's get to 50.
Yeah.
It's as easy to get to 50 than it is 10.
Yeah.
So
what, we'll get out your crystal ball. What do you think the future looks like for small and mid-sized businesses seeking capital and strategic partnerships?
So I believe like I said, the next 10 years, it depends on the industries. Every industry seems to be right now rolling up. You're starting to see, I don't care what industry it is, you're seeing a lot of industries that are rolling into, bigger, they're growing. And the way they're growing is they're buying more acquisitions. And it's across the board. And I think you're going to see more and more of that happen. This, like I said, this population, we have that 58 to 75-year-old that's, they don't have a plan of really getting out of the business. And I think that's going to be the next 10 years. You're going to start seeing a lot more companies, a lot more businesses being rolled up into bigger companies. And so the smaller business, in some ways, in some industries, it's probably going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And AI is going to, that's the other thing is too, what is AI going to do? What's that look like? Right now, we're seeing AI as kind of the wild, wild west. Everybody wants it, but they don't know what to do with it. That's kind of the thing I'd say.
Yeah.
But they know they're going to need it. And so it's a matter of like, what can we do with AI that we can replace, not so much just people, but systems. A lot of these
Yeah.
small businesses, they've been working on spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm.
And they hand Martha the bill of lading, or they hand the bill and they mail it out. The things like that. And so a lot of the things, the processes they're going to be able to do now, they're going to replace a lot of people. But they're also going to replace a lot of systems that they probably are going to do redundancy on. And that's going to be the next thing, I would say.
If you can give one piece of advice to entrepreneurs who feel stuck in their current level of growth, what would it be?
Don't be afraid to reach out to somebody. I look at this as like, people sometimes they think that somebody has not enough time or something like that. I tell you what, you talk to entrepreneurs that have done it, that scaled. They're willing to say, hey, this is what you need to do. They're willing to open up and talk about it. People love to talk about their story. And that's the one thing I would say to entrepreneurs is don't be afraid. If let's say you think you're stuck and you have an idea that you want to get to the next level, find people that have done it. Find people that have done that and actually get out there and knock on those doors. Because if they know you're looking for information, you want the story, they're willing to open up and talk to you about it. And that's the one thing I would say is don't be afraid. If you're in, find that coach, find that mentor to get out there, because that'll get you to, that will really break you free from some of the things that you're working on. And then from there, it's a matter of like, what do I need to get in place of that too?
Great advice. I'm almost interested in how companies' names are generated. Why Bison Group versus Bison Equity Group versus Tiger or Elephant or whatever? What led you to Bison? Is there something unique there, or was it?
Yeah. So the one thing behind me is a picture of a bison.
Yeah.
And the one thing I'd say is what a bison does in a storm. A bison does the one thing, they push through the storm, because they know that if they push through, they're going to get to the other side. And the other side looks a lot better than where they're at now. So I always say it's the entrepreneur needs to do the same thing, is push through that storm, push through, because the other side looks a lot better than where they're at. And that's where I'd say is that don't be afraid to do some of the things that you need to do that. And that's where the bison comes into play. I'm a big hunter and I love the bison. Bisons are really interesting animals, but the one thing I would say is if pushing through the storm is one thing they do very well.
Interesting. I love that. Last question, because we're about out of time. How did you define success when you first started working on your own, and how do you define it today?
Man, that was, the one thing I would say before when I started on my own, it was money, capital,
Sure.
What I could do with it, things I could do with it.
Right.
Now it's things I could do with that capital, things, but a lot now it's giving back now, I think, is more important than anything else. I think that's looking back to where I'm at now versus back then. I think it's a lot more about working with entrepreneurs and having fun. That's the one thing, is enjoying life a lot. Don't take it so serious.
Yeah.
And I think that's the one thing I would say is, we have one chance on this earth, and I feel that the more time you can enjoy doing what you want to do the things like that, and just do that, the capital will come, the money will come. It's just enjoy what you're doing, and then bring people along with you on that trip, because it is going to be a great trip.
I love that answer. So for my audience who would like to get more information on Bison Equity Group and Steve, if you are watching this on YouTube, look down here, and the URL for Steve's website will be there, as well as a link to his book, Make the 10X Leap. And if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app, when it's safe to do so, once you pull over and get off the treadmill, look into your podcast app show notes, and that information will be there as well. Steve Walsh, Bison Equity Group, thank you so much. You said that one of the things you want to do is kind of give back, and you've been giving back to me and my audience. So you're already on that track. So thank you so much for giving back a lot of your expertise and your experience and advice to me and my audience. I truly, truly appreciate it, Steve.
Great. Great talking to you, Mike. I really enjoyed being on the podcast. It's interesting when you sit on a lot of times you get to meet somebody that's been a business owner and really enjoyed what he did. So it was great.
Yeah, and I don't know where you were when I was building my business. I wish I knew you back then. It would have been a whole lot easier. But then I wouldn't have had any good foxhole stories to share. So But thanks for doing what you do. Thanks for helping small businesses and making it a win-win situation. That's awesome.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Reluctant Entrepreneur Podcast. A very special thanks to Steve Walsh for being my guest on this episode. We've been busy recording future episodes with fascinating guests, so be sure to subscribe and get notified when new episodes drop. And one personal favor, if you're watching this on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe. Those 2 simple clicks really help us expand our reach. If you're an entrepreneur or know someone who would make a great guest, I'd love to hear from you. Visit reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com to apply or recommend a guest. You can also reach me directly at mike@reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com. And a shameless plug, if you're interested in my book, The Reluctant Entrepreneur, Anatomy of a Business Startup from Uncertainty to Unstoppable, it's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon and as an audiobook on both Audible and Amazon. Well, that's it for me. Thanks again for listening or watching. Until next time, be unstoppable. I'll see you again soon.